Buongiorno Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Vasca, the podcast. I am so happy to have as my guest today, Chiara Tilesi. Buongiorno, Chiara.
Buongiorno, and thank you so much for having me in your podcast.
Thank you so much for being on it. We've been trying to do this for a while.
I know.
And it feels like today, I don't know, even the sun came out.
I know, huh?
Right? So
It's
it feels like it's a
charm.
lucky charm. So you're actually, this is happening. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time, Chiara. I'll be very honest with you. I'm a big fan of your work.
Thank you so much.
I think what you're doing is so important that I'm going to actually just pass it off right now and let you talk about the various things that you do. I saw you this past fall. I saw a talk that you gave at the Teatro Niccolini here in Florence in conjunction with the Vault.
Right.
And I was extremely moved by what you said, by the work you do, by Tell It Like a Woman, by every single thing you touch and your commitment to gender equality. So I guess I would just like to start with you talking a little bit about what you do, Chiara, and also this life that you live between Florence and Los Angeles.
Right. Thank you so much. So in 2015, I founded We Do It Together, which is a non-profit film production company where men and women are united to change the way women are represented in movies and in media in general, from an object to a subject. Why is that so important? Because unfortunately, violence against women is constantly increasing. No country is exempt, no culture is exempt, no religion is exempt. So there is honestly a repression and, on women. I mean, a repression about women.
Yes.
Why the objectification culture, the culture of objectification has a crucial role into this. Because one of the children of the culture of objectification is actually violence.
Yeah.
So I own you, I possess you, you do what I want, and if you don't, then there is violence involved. So unfortunately, I want to give you some data so we
Please
see
do.
where we are.
Yeah.
According to the latest report of the United Nations of 2024, violence against women before COVID was around 245 million women victims around the world globally annually. That number after COVID became 700 million, over 700 million. So we're talking about one woman out of three is victim of some sort of physical violence, physical or sexual violence. We're not talking about psychological violence.
That's not even in the numbers.
That's not even in the numbers. Wow. Now, if we go back to the numbers and we look at gender equality, how many years to reach gender equality? Before COVID, it would have taken globally 100 years. After COVID, that numbers became 300 years. So we're talking about, around 13 generations. So we, according to the General Secretary of the United Nations, that numbers goes back to 20 years ago. So we're going backward. So
We really are.
We are. In Italy, for example, feminicide is almost every 2 to 3 days. And what is scary is that we normalized it. So, another woman got killed. And it's very important to understand who kills us, because they're not strangers. They're men that actually loves us.
That's
It's
right.
actually the husband, the boyfriend, the lover, the father, the brother. So people around, men around in our life, that a certain point decide to use violence because maybe we didn't obey or we didn't do what they expected us to do. So when we go back to the root of violence, definitely in most of the Western country, we do have laws to protect us, right? We're not in Afghanistan, where the laws are actually quite the opposite. Women cannot even sing, talk in public, or cannot even have a window, or cannot even study, right? In the Western world, we have laws that should prevent, violence against women. So why is this not happening? So what is the root? It's a cultural root. So how can we change? What is a culture made of, and how can we change it, right? So that's the question of we do it together. So culture is actually a belief system. How do we create that belief system? Through our brain, the human being brain works through repetitions. So through the repetitions of certain beliefs or of certain images or certain ideas, then you create this belief system. Eventually, this belief system will become the cultural DNA of that society.
Yeah.
So we could even say that we are what we repeatedly see.
Yeah.
So the other question that we do it together, we studied and asked ourselves, an expert, is what do we see in the world repeatedly about women?
So the narrative.
So what is
sort
the
of-
narrative?
yeah.
So the narrative is usually a very young woman, very skinny, very beautiful, smiling a lot. Doesn't need to have, a lot of dreams, but she has to have a lot of interest. And it's really more about the way we look than more of who we are. So this representation is a very limited representation where most of the women don't identify, right, with that
Not at all.
representation.
Yeah.
And actually is creating unachievable models, because there are models that honestly a regular woman cannot really achieve,
No.
right?
Yeah.
And so that will create another phenomenon from the women point of view, which is, we're never enough, we're never beautiful enough, we're never skinny enough, we're never young enough, we're never sexy enough, we're never enough, no matter what. So how can you change a culture in a fast way? Because we're talking about centuries. We're not talking about, a couple of years or hundreds of years. We're talking about centuries.
Yeah.
So it's many, many years. And it's really embedded in us, and starting from the fairy tales, which have been translated in all around the world. So if we look at the Grimm brothers or other fairy tales and we analyze that, let's take Cinderella. Why we're taking Cinderella is because it's one of the most translated fairy tales everywhere.
Absolutely, yeah.
So who is Cinderella? Cinderella, she's a young, skinny, beautiful, smiling girl who has no friends, because in all the fairy tales, us women have no friends besides a family of birds of mice.
That's right.
Right?
Of course.
And she doesn't own anything, right? Not even a dress. And her stepsisters are her competitors.
Of course they are.
Right? And they're not as beautiful as Cinderella. So what Cinderella has on her side is the beauty and the youth. What does she do all day long? She cleans and sings, because that's what we do in fairy tales. We clean and we sing. And that's a way of grooming women, right? to get
Whistle
to the role,
while you work, right? Yeah. Be happy.
Be happy. You are
You're
cleaning.
cleaning.
And
Hi, baby.
and so then what solution, what option does Cinderella have? Honestly, if you look at her situation, is marry a prince or marry a prince or marry a prince. And so she end up going to this ball, and of course the prince looked at her, and she had to run away. And the next day he's looking for her everywhere.
Right.
But what is very interesting is that he can recognize her from the size of her feet.
The tininess.
The
of her.
tininess of her feet. So first of all, the first question that I asked, what kind of size did she have, right? To be the only one in the village, right? And of course, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor of something in our body, exteriors, beautiful. It's not about her as a person, but it's something exteriors of her. Then, of course, he will marry Cinderella, and then we don't know how it will happen, because what happened in society is that Viagra and divorce happened, and that completely changed the narrative because now the prince wants always a younger princess, right? And so this is the dynamic. Then you will see in Pretty Woman is a very similar dynamic. Actually go to an extreme. She's actually even a prostitute,
exactly.
Right? So it's never about, the narrative in media is rarely about who we are, our dreams, but it's more about what we look like and what is our love interest. Mm-hmm. So with who do we sleep, basically.
Yeah.
And I think the narrative about men is really about their dreams. And then, by the way, they have a love interest. By the way, they have a family. But it's really, we want to see George Clooney thrive and becoming, a lawyer or becoming an astronaut or what have you, right? As women is very limited. Now, lately this has been changing. Mm-hmm. But to a certain extent, because we have to remember that the majority of the movies, of the blockbuster, have male protagonists, right?
And this is still true, Chiara?
The numbers are getting a little bit better, but it's again going back and forth. So it's not really...
We're not registering consistent change,
We're not
right?
registering consistency. So what I believe is the fastest way, and we do have a proof of concept with the community LGBTQ+, which is what happened is that since 20 years ago in Hollywood, they started to represent, and rightfully so, the normalization of the love stories of two gender, to the point that even in Italy, which is a very Catholic country, and even in our prime time show, which is Sanremo, mm-hmm. you can talk about, having a singer like Tiziano Ferro mm-hmm. and talking about his family, his husband, right. While 20 years ago, he could not do that. Yeah. It was prohibited. Really he would have lost all his fans, yeah. Right? So there is a change. And how did that happen? The blueprint is they start producing media content. Why so? Because we spend an average of 8 hours in front of a screen. So this is the new life of the human being. Exactly. So even more so, we are what we repeatedly see. Now the screen could be a phone, could be a TV, or it could be a computer or sure. iPad, what have you. But the reality is that we must create content about us women that goes beyond what we look and go inside of who we are and what we thrive for. Yeah. And that will create a new generation of women that will believe in themselves and then will thrive. Another narrative that is needs to change is that women are being called a minority to a certain extent. Even in United States, if you have a female-owned company, you have some tax incentives, mm-hmm. and also here in Italy, because we are a minority. Now we do have to remember that we are a majority. We are between 50 to 51% of the mm-hmm. population. So we're not a minority at all. So what I think needs to happen right now is changing the narrative in media, mostly. And doesn't mean only movies and documentaries and advertising and fashion, and so on, but also what we can do on a daily basis is through our social media. Because in a way, through our social media, we are all directors, writers, contributors. We are creating a narrative. So unfortunately, young girls receive much more likes if they're very sexy and not as dressed as they, as they probably wanted to be. And so obviously, because you have an immediate reaction from your, audience, right. Then, they have a tendency to be very sensual and very sexy and not talking about who they are, right? Because they get more engagement. But we have to remember that in the long term, this is not going to work because we really have to bet on who we are and start believing in ourselves and start to do this also together with men.
Exactly.
So that's what I stress a lot. We do it together as men and women united. Because I think it's kind of silly that we divided ourselves. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all have one heart. You know, we all have one brain. Some of us more, some others less.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day,
which is why we need to do this together.
we have to do
right?
this together, and we have to create. You know, when you protect women, when women thrive, what's happening is that you're protecting your children, and children will thrive
That's
as
right.
well.
Yeah.
So this is, you know, it's not really difficult to do it if there is the will to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's the next question. Does the industry, Hollywood or the entertainment industry, really wants to make this change?
That's what I want. That was my next question for you, Chiara, because I want you to talk about what you do, so what you're actively doing to try to change that narrative, and how Hollywood, in your opinion, responds or is responding.
Well, what I do, we do it together. We're constantly producing content, movies, documentary about women by women for everyone, right? Because it would be hard for me to represent a man exactly how he feels that he needs to be represented. So that's why we want to engage more women, because they know how we want to be represented, because they're women. So we also do campaign. So one of our latest movie, Tell It Like a Woman, which actually got an Academy Award nomination for Best Song, written by Diane Warren and performed by Sophia Carson, is a movie directed by 7 female directors around the world, where they're telling stories about women. Very inspiring story, because we don't also want to represent women as victims, because the more we represent them as victims,
You keep the narrative the
you
same.
keep the narrative
Yeah, and you keep
the
them
same.
in the you
keep them in
relegate
that
them to the same
box.
space. Yeah.
And so we want to, you know, represent and tell the story of the difficulties, but also how we overcome it, how we change it, right?
Yeah.
And how we thrive through that.
Yeah. I love that. So how has Hollywood reacted?
I don't think Hollywood is willing to change. It's a male-based, industry, and I don't think there is a will to change. Now they're saying that they want to do it, but one thing is words. Words are cheap, not cheap.
Yeah. Where's your cheap? Yeah.
So I mean, facts are that they're not really doing much. And when they do one thing, like for example with Barbie, which I do have my question marks, because we're talking about a doll at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very objectifying doll, and it's a perfect, and it's a model that is unachievable. And that I think that what we will remember about Barbie is not the few sentences of feminism, but we will remember how Margot Robbie looks like a Barbie at the end of the day. So I don't think that's the best model to represent us.
Mm-hmm.
I might have a lot of people against this thought, because it was a very successful movie.
Mm-hmm.
But if you analyze it, I really think that it didn't make us justice. I mean, I would have loved to see a movie that has been, such a great success and made more than $1 billion, would have been more about a story of a woman who actually, made the difference in the
Right.
world than a doll.
Yeah, and because there are those stories. And that's sort of my next question for you, because you talk a lot about changing the narrative, and you're doing so much to do that. And there are other people who are doing it too.
Absolutely.
And there are people who respond, and it's always funny, because obviously people respond to these things. Women are huge consumers of this culture, right? And so I guess my question for you would be, is there something you can think of that fills a void, for example, where that gets to where Barbie didn't get to? I mean, can you think of either a film or an example, someone who really did, who is changing the narrative, who is showing, actively different versions of, the various versions of women that are out there, because there is a request for it, from consumers. So you would think, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? That
Yes and no, because you see, at the end of the day, it's all what really matters is what we believe. So Hollywood is convinced that movies about women don't make money, and no matter how much you can prove them wrong, they still believe that, right? So, and they still believe that horrors and action and with a male protagonist is what really makes most of the money. I tend to disagree, honestly. And there are many movies that have been, done in, from Frida Kahlo, for example. There's many true stories of the one of the three scientists that got a nomination. I forgot now the name, but there are tons of movie about women because most of them they are, inspired through a
by true stories,
story,
right?
And I think it would be great since even historically we don't really talk about women. It would be nice to start enrich our culture and our knowledge with more stories, even historically, of
Absolutely.
women that we don't even know that they did great things. We're working on a huge pipeline of projects, and our dream is to create the first no-profit film studios, and dedicated to the empowerment of women, and we're working on that. So we have a pipeline of projects. Let's see if everything around women is a challenge, unfortunately. And then there's no really that support that we think of. But I'm optimistic because the new generation seems to be more in tune and seems to be more aware of it. And the youngers, it's almost like there is a dichotomy. On one side, you have very advanced, youngers, and then on the other side, you have a Kardashian models. Girls, right, which is extreme objectification of girls. So there's both, and so hopefully the one that are investing in themselves are the one that will become the majority, so that they can create themselves a better future for themselves, for their children, for their family, but also for men.
Society too.
For society.
Because I think that's the problem, is that when you keep repeating these narratives, in addition to the fact that it's also just boring. I mean, let's be honest, right? It's like, do we have to see this movie again? Right? There's so much out there. And I think what you said, especially about the younger generation, makes me very happy, because for a generation that's inherited so much bad stuff, I think one of the best things that they've inherited is that they don't have, especially a lot of the young women, have a very different attitude toward how they're represented. They're very sort of not willing, I think, to accept a lot of what generations before them had to accept just by virtue of the fact that we didn't have any other options. So I think I'd like to see a natural progression whereby the younger generation of men and women who have a totally different outlook, who are trying to dismantle those narratives and those stereotypes, will then bring in more interesting conversations and stories. I mean, we're talking about storytelling in the end, right?
Absolutely.
And so why it's kind of like boggling to me that women are everywhere. I just read an article yesterday about, even just maybe 5-10 years ago, women in Hollywood, once they hit 40 probably, it was slim pickings for parts, right?
They're already dead at 35.
Exactly. So yesterday, two things I did that I'd be interested in your opinion on. One was I saw Kathy Bates's acceptance speech at the Screen Writers, the SAG Awards, and she said something like, "Thank you for writing such a great part for an old lady like me." And that really struck me. First of all, she's like one of the probably most accomplished character actors of all time. She's done a gazillion movies. And there was nothing, she wasn't saying it as a political statement. She wasn't expecting to win. I really think it just came out sort of spontaneously. And I thought to myself, isn't that amazing that in 2025, Kathy Bates has to say, thank you for writing such an interesting part for an old lady. There are so many interesting parts there's so many interesting stories. So that was sort of one thing that happened to me yesterday. And then I was reading an article. I'm a huge fan of The White Lotus. And I've always been a huge fan of Parker Posey, who's, she's a complicated female actress, right? And why is she complicated? Because she doesn't fit into any easy categories, right? And so I'm reading this article with her and sort of about how Hollywood has always not really gotten her, right? And so looking at an actor like her, she's about my age, she's in her mid to late 50s, and now she's getting all these interesting juicy parts because she's moved into finally, she can sort of use her weirdness, her quirkiness even more now for more interesting, mature women roles. So there are conversations going on, and things are slowly changing, but I can't stop thinking about the numbers that you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, because at this rate, this is a snail's pace. So we're never going to, the numbers that you quoted at the beginning of how long it's going to take for us to get somewhere. I mean, what could potentially speed up that process, Chiara?
Again, I believe that changing the narrative is because we saw the blueprint of the LGBTQ plus community and how successful they were in changing that narrative, for sure. But the other element is that women needs to take responsibility. In which sense? There is Jimmy Carter did a wonderful TED talk because he was a great feminist and he was very supportive. And he said, why would you wait, men who are earning 20 to 30% more, who don't have glass ceiling, who date and marry much younger girls, who, they have, all the game is on their side, right? Why would you expect them to change the rules of the game? And that's very interesting because most of the men might not even be aware of what we go through on a daily basis, right? So definitely, if we want to make the change, we really have to stick together. And I'm talking about, beside the involvement of men, this should be led by women. For sure, with the support and the help of them, men, because we are one society. But at the end of the day, we are the one who are thriving, who are aware that there is a huge disparity. And so we are the one that needs to stick together. We don't have the luxury anymore to say, oh no, I don't really like her, or oh, no, she's not really the real deal. Who cares? Let's stick together. Let's create a movement. Let's involve as many men as we can. But at the end of the day, let's do it. And instead, every time, I wouldn't say every time, I should correct myself. Sometimes, I encounter women that start pointing their finger or their energy, but most of the women are jealous, or of course we're being brainwashed. The prince was one and he's going to choose only one. So at the end of the day, it's a century of brainwashing and of creating a wrong narrative. But when you become aware of it, own it and change it and do everything you can. Start saying no to certain things. Start not listening to those rap music that they're under the umbrella of art, or they are talking about raping women. Don't allow that. I don't care if it's artistic. We're talking about human rights. That needs to come first, right? So what happened recently in Italy with this singer, right? That, they were saying, he's writing a lot of songs were extremely violent against women, and then, but you cannot touch the art. Excuse me, not if we are increasing, and we're part of the problem, because we do have a huge problem is if 1 woman out of 3 is victim of physical or sexual violence in the world. We definitely need to be aware of it and start, saying, you cannot say or you cannot sing that if this woman is not going to stay with me, I'm going to rape her, because you are creating a narrative that then will create a belief system, and then will create the cultural DNA of that society.
Right. I think you raise so many important points, and one of them is that we do have a choice as consumers.
Absolutely.
And, I think it's something that we need to recognize, that we do have this power.
Absolutely.
And we can choose what we want to, have in our lives in terms of, entertainment or whatever. I think you raise such a critical point, and it's something that I have seen in my life and I've never understood it, which is women being pitted against each other, or women looking at each other like enemies. I've always been an ally of women, as have you, and I never saw, thank God I didn't buy into the narrative, right?
Right, the competitor.
Right.
Yeah, it's either me or you.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
it makes no sense. And once you realize, which is what your work is all about, which is why I love it.
Thanks.
Because we can't do it alone. And we can't do it alone as women. We can't do it alone as, single individuals. You use the word movement, and I think that that's the only word that we can use here. And so I'm interested in hearing from you the kind of projects that you're working on that you feel good about, and, the people that you're involved with who are going out and making these projects that are really actively changing what audiences are asking for, changing the way we as women are depicted. Then there are all these competing factors as well. Like in the U.S., there are all these movements now, like that I think really muddy the waters. Like they don't take away from anything or the importance of the work that you're doing, but there's a lot of stuff going on, like particularly right now, that I think is very confusing. So it's nice to know that there are people who are have been working toward a very specific goal with a lot of rigor and a lot of research for a long time. I mean, Chiara, when you talk, and you've spoken before the United Nations,
right?
There's a reason for that. You started with the facts, and the facts are alarming.
They're very alarming, very alarming. And to go back to your point, I think that it's true that unfortunately there is this narrative where it's either it's really about, if you think about the narrative of a man can save me, what it implies is that I'm not strong enough, I'm not enough, I'm not smart enough, right? I'm not enough anyway. So I need. So what happens when you need a man is what you're doing, you're giving your power to somebody else. And then you depend upon that person. This is extremely dangerous. That either a man or a woman does it, whoever does it, okay?
Yeah.
We are, we have to understand that as human beings, we have an infinite potential, all of us. We have creativity, which is infinite, and creativity has no gender, right? Money now has gender, because all 98% of the game changer in the world. I don't know if you know, but I'm a cultural leader at the World Economic Forum at Davos, right? And over there, 98% of the game changers are male, and I would even say white male, right? There's not much for us women right now. I would say, don't. I mean,
okay, but a high.
It's a very high. I would say
high.
more than 90,
okay.
right? And that the few women that are there, there's few powerful women, but so we have to understand a few things. If you are the only woman, in let's say in a company, don't take it as a compliment, okay? Don't take it as a compliment. Maybe the next one, who will be replaced, it's you, right? Because there's only one. So we have to understand that the narrative, there is only one seat at the table, and you better get it. It's a wrong narrative. So as we do it together, we say, no, thank you. We are building our own table together, and then eventually we will invite you, right?
I love
so
that.
that's a different perspective. We don't have to kill each other to get that one seat. Take it. I don't care. I'll build my own table. And that's what we're doing, and we do it together. We're building a table together where women and men are welcome. And what we want to do, we want 51% of the population to thrive as much as the other 49% of the population is. Yeah. And so this is a game changer. This is the real game changer for society, not the million, billions, and what have you. Because when you have a positive effect on 51% of the population, this is really game changer, right? So we have to remember that this can happen, but on one condition, that we stick together and that we invest time and energy. It's not going to be easy, because we're talking about centuries of DNA codes, of cultural codes, that we have to change them. And it's not easy, and there will be time where we are victims of these codes ourselves. I found myself one time when I'm 50 right now, I was 46, and in social media, at a certain point, I realized that I had different ages. And I said, oh my God, how did I do that? And of course, they were a little bit younger all the time. And I was like, oh my God, because I'm a woman, and I'm kind of cheat here and there a couple of years, I'm single, so I'm like, a couple of years here and there, like I'm ashamed of my age, right? And then one day I look at myself and say, oh my God, I'm preaching these, and then I'm a victim myself. So I said, I need to change these, because you do things almost unconsciously.
That's the scary part.
It's a scary part.
As I was thinking,
we're all looking at our wrinkles. We're all looking at our weight.
No, as you were saying it, I was thinking, when I was growing up, I remember, hearing, I'm sure you heard it too, you never ask a woman her age.
Of course.
Or my grandmother, who would respond, it's a military secret.
Right. I mean,
it's not a military secret. It's
I'm
everywhere.
Of my
Me
age.
too. I put my age everywhere.
Right. So what I did, I was invited on a TED Talk. I said, I have to do something public so that I don't go to change it, right? And so I remember I was in this TED Talk, and I started by saying, because I had a few taboo that I wanted to share, so get over with it, and then I try to embrace myself and love how I am, because that's the most powerful thing. And so I said, hello, my name is Chiara Tilesi, I'm 46 years old. I actually gained some weight at that time because I quit smoking. So I said, I'm 66 kilos, have no children, I'm not married. What's wrong with me? Now, what was interesting, this is my third
good hook.
This is my third TEDx talk. And so what was interesting was the reaction of the audience was like, oh. Now, the other TED talk that I did, nobody, I gave data, about violence, and nobody was like, oh. But when you say, because I hit 4 taboo in one, the age, the weight, the being single, so it means that nobody really wants me, and no children. So, and of course, I'm a selfish woman, right? We never question a man, right? Actually, if my name, try to do this vice versa. Let's say my name was Mark, I would have been a catch. He's single, he has no children, and so on, Don't we say that, a little bit of stomach is sexy on men, right?
Men, silver foxes.
Of course. Salt and pepper.
Dashing older gentlemen.
Try that on me, the salt, pepper. Or try that on me, the bold look. Or try that on me, the little stomach, right? So there's standard. Two standards. There are 2 narratives. And so, first of all, we don't have to be ashamed of who we are. Each one of us is beautiful, man or woman, the way he or she is. Because at the end of the day, it's all about love. And so it's all about embracing who we are. And to love ourselves. And that's probably the most difficult thing. And so I also talk about ageism, because even there are 2 standards. There is an English saying that says, men age like a glass of wine, women like a glass of milk. Don't we all love yogurt, right? Because milk becomes yogurt and wine becomes,
Better.
yeah, much better. And, some of the most expensive wine are the oldest wine.
Right.
So there are two standards. But what is really fascinating to me is that all of this is just an illusion. They're all lies. So it will take us a second to switch it.
So easy.
What make a lie real is when we believe into this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I believe it most of the time. Myself too.
We all
Still.
do. Well, but that's how we were
I'm
conditioned.
honest, because I could say I'm a superwoman. I don't care. No, I do
No,
care.
Chiara, we all do.
Because
And
we all start to become invisible. And when you become invisible, like Pasolini, which is an Italian poet, says, the real death is not dying, but is to become invisible.
Yeah.
And women start slowly to become invisible into this modern society from 35 on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I would want to say to all the women, you are very visible, but it's your choice to believe or not to believe a lie.
Yeah.
And so I would like to give this message. Don't ever believe a lie,
Yeah.
because it's not going to make you happy, and it's not going to make your children happy.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, we have only one life that we know of.
Yeah.
So let's make sure that we make the best out
Yeah.
of it, and let's not believe in this lie that are limiting,
It's limiting all of us.
everything is possible. Just believe in it.
So as I listen to you, I can't help but be just so impressed with just how passionate you are. And I mean, where did this all come from, Chiara? Was there sort of a moment in your life where have you always been passionate about these things? Was it something that you just always felt was a calling, or at a certain point did you just say like, basta, I need to do something about this?
It was a mix. I mean, it's always, it's always a personal journey. It's never something outside of you. So it also depends in which family you grow up, which father you had, which, boyfriend or man you related with. So it's all of that and much more than that. But it all started in 2015, where two well-known directors and actress came to me, female director, that they wanted to make movies about women, and they weren't allowed to. And I was like shocked. So I started doing all the research, and then I found the Pandora box, which again, I'm part of the system in a way, meaning culturally all of us are, even the most liberal woman is, right? Because it really tackles our insecurity. And so, because if you believe that the value of the woman in society is really related to giving birth, beauty, and and age, and how young you are, obviously, the last two, every day you're a little bit less beautiful on a physical point of view and a little less young.
Right. It's a huge mission you've taken upon yourself.
Yeah, I know.
And
every time
I'm
in the
wondering how
midst
you
of
think about that.
Every time I'm in the midst of a project, I say, why did I
do
do
this?
that?
Remind me.
Every time.
For the greater good. This is what I'm here to tell you today. And this is what we're telling everybody out there, that it really does. It takes us together deciding that we want to make change.
Absolutely.
And I think it's that you're not acting alone, that there are other people
for sure. Oh, no, I would never be able to do this by myself.
And also that there are so
Kidding
many
me?
people who are really engaged and
Absolutely.
wanting to make a difference.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned, and of course I'm very curious, and so you mentioned like projects and pipelines and things,
Right.
and so you've gotten me curious. So can you talk about any upcoming projects, or
Yes.
can you take a little spoiler or something that we can look forward
When
to?
we talk about this campaign, because it's happening next week, so March 8th.
Okay.
So in last year with Nasdaq, we launched this I Am campaign, Io Sono.
Yes.
And it's a campaign that was launched at Nasdaq in Times Square, the iconic Times Square.
I saw you posted something about it. Unbelievable.
Yeah, 30 women from the industry in front of the camera, but also behind the camera because they never, have the opportunity, and they're the one who are working to create this cultural DNA with this narrative. Each one of them, in contrast with the of the culture of the objectification, they have to add, a declaration of who they feel they are. So I am bold, I am strong, what have you.
Right.
Now, what was very interesting is out of these 30 women, different ages, different countries, different profession in the industry of the entertainment, none of them said, I am young, I'm beautiful, I'm sexy, I am skinny, I'm sweet. They all kind of say, I'm a creator,
Right.
I'm bold, I'm,
Sure.
what have you. So now we're launching this campaign, and this is really, an anteprima that I'm giving to you guys. On March 8th, at least they gave us a day, to celebrate International Women's Day. I wish it would have been every single day, but
It should be every single day.
But we take what they give us at the moment until we create more.
That's right, until we take up more space.
Right, we are projecting this campaign on Fontana di Trevi. Yeah, so
I'm sad that the podcast is going to come out after this.
Yeah. Otherwise, everybody would be invited to, and on La Mole Antoniana
In
of
Turin.
Torino.
How nice. How wonderful.
Yeah, both at the same time, and plus on all the lead wall of Rome.
This is incredible.
Yeah,
Chiara.
it's
This is
incredible.
huge.
So it's called the seed intervention, so that our expectation and our goal, let's say, it's to invite all the women to post a picture with their I am, right? For this time, I decided to put I am a dreamer, because these are all dreams, and then repost, we do it together. Look for us on social media, and then tag us, and we will repost you.
I love this project. I'll find a way to post it anyway. And this was something that you...
Yeah, I created this campaign
I
for
love
We Do It
this.
Together.
Yeah.
Because, because the problem is that when you become aware of a problem, then you have the tendency to talk about the problem, not of the solution, right? So, and we're all kind of victim about that, right? So it's kind of, say, oh, we have this problem with... Okay, yes, we have to create awareness, because there's no even awareness. So on one side, we create awareness, but on the other side, we want to create solution. Of course, we are in the creative world, so we created this campaign, and I'm glad to say that we have 40 women from different parts of the world,
great.
and each one has her own I am. Some of them are actually very original, and it's a way to give a strong message that we start shifting from the object to the subject. Not that we are an object, we've always been a subject, but it's the narrative.
Right.
So I always say there's nothing wrong about us women. What is wrong is the way we are represented.
Yeah. And I think, all of these huge steps that you've been taking to really give women agency, remind us of how important it is that we remember that we have the power to make changes. I think
Absolutely.
that's the problem with the narrative, Chiara.
Absolutely.
And so it really becomes, like a vicious circle where you can't get out of the narrative because you're so entrenched in the narrative, And so that's why I was saying before that I have a lot of faith in the younger generation, because I think that they have a different attitude towards...
Some of them.
Yeah.
Not all
Hopefully.
of them, because there is two sides.
yeah.
They're the two extreme.
Right.
But I think it's our duty to give them as many tools as we can to shape
exactly
the new narrative.
Yeah, and the thing is, I want to come back to this because we're coming to the end of the podcast, which is like kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that you've said so far that most struck me is, and it's the most obvious thing, Chiara, but we lose sight of it, which is love.
Absolutely.
And that's where the key is, right?
Absolutely. But in the moment, love is very complex. I'm talking about not, in a relationship.
No,
I'm talking about love,
Like
right?
humanity,
Self-love. Self-love.
Right.
It's probably the most difficult thing, and sometimes I'm shocked how little we love ourselves, and myself too. Huh?
All
So
of us.
I'm not here the teacher of anyone, because everything I'm talking about, I either have been there, I've done it, you know.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
or I'm still in the midst of it, right? You know, loving myself. You know, I always have a hard time to love myself, no matter how much I do. You know, it's never enough, and maybe it's because it has nothing to do with what you do, but it's who you are, right? And no matter who you are, then it's never enough either. So, and I think there is almost like a virus. It's a virus of the mind, right? Where none of us, none of the gender, I mean the two genders, male or female, none of the genders are really, you know, in the program to self-love for some reason. I don't know when the bug came in.
I don't know.
And
I missed it
I
too.
cannot find the antivirus, but
Neither
trust
can I.
me, I'm
Yeah,
trying so hard,
I
you
know.
know, to love myself more, and therefore love others
Yeah.
more, right? Because at the end of the day, we are one. I mean, from the quantum physics point of view, we're one energetically. So I'm just shocked how we constantly divided each other in,
Yeah.
you know, you know, I don't want to become, you know, philosophical now, but it's really comes to that. I think the simple things are who you are, love yourself, and then, especially as women, I see that the most difficult part for women is to accept who they are. And I understand, because we have unachievable models, you know, so of course we already start by losing. So we cannot win this game, you know, we cannot. So either we change the rules of the games, or we step out from this game and play another game. There is this author, I forgot her name, and they ask her, tell me more or less, tell me in 5 sentences what is life about. And she says, well, life is, I was walking on a street, there was a hole, I didn't see the hole, I went inside the hole, sono caduta.
I fell?
I fell in the hole, it took me forever to get out of the hole, right? And then finally I get out of the hole. The next day I wake up, take the same street, there is the hole, I fell again the hole, this time it take me less, but still it was a long time. And then the third day I take the same street, I see the hole, I fail again the hole, it take me less. The fourth day I take the same street, and then I see the hole and I miss the hole, and I keep going. The fifth day I change street. And I think that's our journey.
I love this, Chiara, and I can't think of a better way to end. I am so grateful to you, not just for coming on the podcast and for talking to me. I think I want to thank you on behalf of a lot of us for the work that you're doing. You're tirelessly working to make change, and you've been doing it for a really long time. And I know it's not easy, but let's all of us really take that other street, because we can do it.
We can do it.
I really think we can do it together.
We can do it together. And please subscribe to our newsletter.
Absolutely.
Join us on on Instagram, Facebook. Do we have Twitter? I don't even know.
We'll post everything.
No, we don't.
We'll post everything.
Post everything.
Don't worry.
Join us.
But we'll post everything in the
Write
show
to
notes.
us if you have any ideas. We really want to make the difference and create, many movies, many documentaries, many stories, so that it will be easier for us and for the new generation, especially because they're going to live much longer than us. Imagine a woman now, she feels already old by 35. Now the expectation
It's
could
like
be
100.
120. So they'll be desperate for more than 70 years.
Well, and that means that there's a lot of need
There
for
is a lot of
interesting roles for
women,
women
yes.
out there. And so let's keep doing it.
right.
Let's make the change.
And let's make it together.
I think we can do it.
Thank you so much
Grazie
for having
a te,
us.
Chiara. No, it was incredible.
Thank
Grazie.
you. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Done.